Good morning, everyone. A warm welcome to our special event, a collaboration between Lorma Colleges and Universitas Persada Indonesia Y.A.I. I am Dita and I will be your MC today. It is a joy to see all of you here as we come together to explore our theme, Cultural Roots Interweaving Indigenous Southeast Asian Approach in Mental Health. With this event, it brings together perspectives from our both countries to enrich the conversation on mental health through the cultural roots and indigenous wisdom. This event will start with the national anthem, followed by the opening prayer, continue with the welcome remarks, and then the keynote presentation. After that, we will have the Q&A and open forum, and to conclude, we have the closing remarks. Before we start, let us officially open our event by honoring our nations with the showing of the national anthems. First, Indonesian national anthem, followed by the Philippine national anthem.
Kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Kayang magiliw, kaya sa silanganan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyagan ang magiting, sa mandulupin, di ka pasisingil, sa nalagang tutok sa simoy at sa langit mong pagkaw, ay nilagang tulang awit sa pagkayang minamahal. Ang isang ng patawad mo'y tagumpay na nag-iindig, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may magtitindig. Lumalang araw ng walang pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang hindi kaya ng pagkay mga amin, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Thank you. Next, to formally open our program with a prayer, we will now be led by Pastor John Stephen Goyce.
Gracious Father in heaven, thank you for this wonderful journey that we can have a beautiful moment of reflecting upon the importance of mental health in both of our societies. As we partner with Indonesia, may you continually give us a great experience that we could share wonderful insights as we go through the discussion today. May you bless us with so much understanding that it would be used in our day-to-day life. We thank you for the lives of each one that are present here today. Bless us all together in your mighty name. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Joyce, for the uplifting prayer. Now we are honored to hear welcome messages from our representatives. From Lorma College, Dr. Amelia N. Vicente, PhD, as the Director of the Global Partnership and Languages Office.
Hey, good morning from the Philippines. Salamat Pagiyang Inda. To our partners from Indonesia, our director of the international program, I guess I saw him in the Zoom this morning, to Dr. Churol Anwar, to
Yes.
Ma'am Dewi Shukriya, to the faculty members of the College of Psychology, and to the students, to the Lorma College of Psychology students, faculty, and to their dean, Dr. Rogelio Quiroga. Once again, a pleasant morning. So on behalf of Lorma Colleges, I am so delighted to welcome all of you in this first joint webinar entitled Cultural Roots, Interweaving Indigenous Southeast Asian Approaches in Mental Health. We are really very grateful with our partner, Universitas Persada, Indonesia, to for their participation and for joining us today in this webinar. This webinar is highly aligned and very relevant to one of our key priorities in our institution, which is actually wellness and wholeness in the Lormanian community. Now, I believe that such is also one of the thrusts of the Universitas Persada Indonesia in their institution. Our institutions value and care the mental health of all personnel and students. So for this joint webinar, we will be learning from each other cultural knowledge and educational information on approaches to mental health, and that health and wellness are not only drawn from scientific advancement, but also in our healthy cultural values and practices. So for today's webinar, let's continue to tune in and let's enjoy this day, and let's learn from each other. Thank you and good morning and mabuhay.
Thank you for your words and welcome remarks, Dr. Amelia. And now the representative from Universitas Persada Indonesia, Y.A.I, Dr. Khoirul Anwar, as the Director of International Office.
Good morning, everybody. I'm so glad to meet you this morning, and your face is very wonderful face. You know, I'm excellent. It look like very excellent person this morning. I'm so glad to meet you. All right, so as a director of international office in Persada University, uh, this is I'm very proud that we can implement our collaboration that we already talked a lot in Philippines before when we met each other. So this morning is kind of implementation, that kind of MOU. So God bless us all, yeah, for today. And hopefully we can learn each other, especially for in the psychological side, because we have the term today is cultural root interviewing indigenous Southeast Asia approach in mental health. Yeah, I think this is very, very important because we are in the same culture, almost the same culture. Yeah, in Philippine we have the province with what we call Pangasinan. Pangasinan is also the word of Indonesia, which is the place. Yeah, the place for for producing a dry fish. The Pangasinan mean from the basic word of asin, which is a salt, salty. Yeah, so we are the same culture and we are the same, not much different in a culture. So this way, I'm proud for today that we are try to increasing about the discussion in the mental health, especially in the youth, maybe, yeah, especially now on we have to fight the problem. We have to fighting the problem in mental health, especially for the young generation. uh, okay, thank you and good luck all of you. Hopefully this webinar can give our best lessons for Lorma College University, so does in for Persada University. Yeah, in the future, I believe the collaboration is not just for today in the webinar today. Hopefully, in the future, is followed by research or followed by any other program. Thank you very much. Good luck, good morning, and mabuhay.
Thank you, Dr. Khairul, for your inspiring words and warm welcome remarks. Next, it is time for our main event, which is the keynote presentation. And I'm very excited to introduce you to all our speakers. We are honored to introduce the first keynote speaker today, Dr. Rogelio Quiroga, currently as the Academic Dean of Lorma Colleges. He is a licensed professional teacher, registered psychometrician, and award-winning researcher. With a PhD in psychology, international teaching, and management experience in the Philippines, Japan, Taiwan, and active member in global psychological associations. Today, he brings a wealth of expertise in mental health and cross-cultural research. With the topic Indigenous Approaches to Mental Health in Southeast Asia, we are honored to welcome Dr. Rogelio Quiroga. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ma'am Dita. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Salamat pagi to our brothers and sisters from Indonesia. Mabuhay to our Filipino counterparts. And we are really excited that we have this collaboration. We are actually starting something beautiful between the two countries, and this partnership is really towards helping each other and creating a beautiful path for both Philippines and Indonesian approach to psychology. So let me present my, so can you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you very much for confirming. So, again, this is in collaboration with Universitas Persada Indonesia and Lorma Colleges. And my task today is to deliver a topic or the discussion on indigenous approaches to mental health in Southeast Asia. And that is putting our culture, our Indonesian and Filipino culture, and honoring our roots and looking at our indigenous practices in the approach of mental health treatment and intervention. So um, I'm only given 30 minutes to speak, so I will start and dive right in. Okay, so today's goal is something that we should do beyond the couch. Um, we are so used into approaching mental health using the DSM, using the Western teachings that we learn normally from school. But for today, we are going to go deeper than that. We are going to look into our roots, cultural roots, and try to heal the soul and the indigenous way, the Filipino way, the Indonesian way. So we'll go beyond the couch that is usually prescribed or being practiced in the Western culture. So our objective for today is for us to understand the different indigenous psychological concepts as used in therapy and how Indonesians and Filipinos approach therapy. We are going to look at the different influences of our spiritual beliefs and how these spiritual beliefs affect our practice in our help-seeking behavior, and ultimately to integrate these cultural approaches into the mental health care strategy. We are not going to replace or dispel our training in DSM, but we are going to supplement that. We're going to give our Filipino and Indonesian touch of approach because it's our culture is unique, and these are seldom touched in the Western approach or the DSM. So this is our opportunity to highlight what our culture uh, can do to shape our approach to therapy and treatment. Okay, so let's look first at the mental health crisis that we face in general in Southeast Asian countries. We notice there is a mismatch of worlds. Why? Um, we usually are taught Western approaches or American approaches in dealing with mental disorders or um, anxiety or even distress. And the way treatment is prescribed is also from a Western perspective. This creates a drift or a problem because the Western mental models, are somewhat individualistic and biomedical in nature, and it's not usually applicable in Southeast Asian countries like us because we are more of a collectivist country. We try to our behavior and our dealings with other people is not purely individual, and the problem is Western approaches, they try to look at the person as a single entity, and it's not that's not the case for Indonesia and the Philippines. So from there alone, the problem exists. So because of that, there is a disconnect in the way we try to diagnose disorders or mental health problems or anxiety or even crisis. Because in the DSM, when we, let's say, for example, we look at depression, we look at the biomedical or physiological factors of the individual alone. But in our community, in the Indonesian or the Philippine community, we try to look at the totality. And sometimes we look at depression as as a spiritual imbalance. And nowhere in the DSM can we find any guide or any technique that treats depression looking at a spiritual lens. So there lies the problem. We cannot always use the approaches taught by Western psychology to our Asian setting. So now our mission is to look at the different indigenous psychological tools or approaches used in Indonesia and the Philippines, and how they offer alternatives to therapy or approaches in understanding mental health, and hopefully be able to integrate these approaches into our treatment modality. So there is a core divide between our approach in understanding mental health. If you see for the Western approach, the focus is most often on the individual's mind and brain, the physiology, the chemistry that goes, and it looks at the cause of illness as probably rooting from a chemical imbalance or a traumatic experience. And so, therefore, the treatment goal is for the person to achieve autonomy and control over himself or herself. And most often than not, it also incorporates drug-based treatment. So medication, so they have our anxiolytics, our antidepressants, right? And the healer is, of course, the therapist or the psychiatrist. Now, this is different. We have a different picture if we look at the Southeast Asian approach or in the Philippine or Indonesian setting. Because for Filipinos and Indonesians, the focus is on the inner self. In the Filipino, we call that loob. And in Batin, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Batin in Indonesia. And we do not only try to understand the brain and mind of the person, but the person is a total individual, interconnected with his or her community and even the spirits around them. And we look at the cause of illness as a disruption of harmony, harmony in terms of the social aspects, spiritual aspects, or the natural aspects. So it's not only taking into consideration chemical imbalance or traumatic experiences, but we also look at the other factors that could cause the illness or mental disorder or mental health crisis in an individual. And so therefore, our treatment goal is to restore that harmony, be it spiritual or natural in nature. And our Indonesian approach is to also incorporate the Kabatinan, is a system of the Japanese mysticism and belief, focusing also on the inner self or the loob, and in search of truth and meaning. So for collectivist countries like Philippines and Indonesia, we most of the time, if we encounter mental health disorders, we first go to the albularyo, or if something is bizarre, if something is not uh, normal, or the person is behaving abnormally, the first approach is to go to an albularyo. We call it an albularyo in the Philippine vernacular, the dukon or the kiai for Indonesia. So we don't immediately go to the therapist or a psychiatrist. So for today's topic, because I'm only given 30 minutes to talk, let's look at one of those aspects. Again, we've mentioned earlier that we have the natural, we have the social, and the spiritual. For today, we're going to look at the spiritual bridge. We are going to look at the spiritual aspect and how it influences our approach to understanding mental health. So, we're going to look at the different healing, indigenous healing or traditional healing modalities in the Philippines and Indonesia. How we are similar, and there are some differences, but how we are similar as both nations. We are again brothers and sisters, and I noticed that even our approaches are quite the same. So let's look first at the Philippines. In the Philippine setting, the spiritual bridge in the Philippine setting. So we have the different core concepts of our therapist or healer. We have the albularyo and how we try to understand the causes of an illness. So we have a different theology apart from what we already know from the DSM. And we have certain rituals or modalities in treatment and systems of intervention. So let's look at them one by one. In the Philippines, what we call the indigenous healer is the albularyo. He is usually the elderly man or woman in the community, and the community members offer great respect and revere them with great, because they are usually the wisest and the oldest in the community. So we term them as albularyo, but also albularya for females, and they are usually the general practitioners of traditional healing. So they make use of different herbs and plants and leaves to bring the um, healing to their patient. They also make use of massage, or we call that hilot massage, making use of oils and other concoctions to treat the individual, and they also perform spiritual rituals. They could make use of candles, they will make use of also prayers and talismans in order to understand what is going to an individual who is suffering or behaving bizarrely. So in the Philippine context, we have the elderly person or woman who is revered to, and they are usually the first person whom the community tries to consult with whenever they face these kinds of um, behavioral um, um, manifestations in an individual. So we call them the albularyo in the Philippines. Another approach for our albularyo is to make use of different leaves and branches because they believe that sometimes spirits or unfriendly spirits sometimes possess the person. And so what they do is to make use of leaves. So the albularyo or the shaman or the healer will make use of different leaves and branches, and they will whip the person with different branches, hoping to drive away that evil spirit or that entity who is in that person. And sometimes the albularyo also may go to the wilderness or may go to the specific place wherein the person had encountered that spirit or entity, and the albularyo or the shaman will perform rituals or prayers or offerings to appease the spirits or the entities who were disturbed in that place. So the albularyo in the Philippine setting plays an important role in bringing healing to whatever a person is feeling or encountering. And the way we understand the causes of illness for this in the Philippine in the indigenous approach is that it's always most of the time attributed to magical or influential or spiritual entities as the main cause of the behavior or the distress or the anxiety being experienced by an individual. If they're, we would see them being afflicted by earth spirits or anitos. So in the Philippine setting, if something is uh, quite different, is not normal, or if the person is behaving differently, we would attribute that as the cause or the works of adiwata. We call that adiwata. Diwata are the guardian spirits of nature because we believe in the Philippine setting that there are spirit dwellers who are guarding the specific area. For example, it's a lake or a river, it's a mountain or the forest. They are the ones guarding the sanctity or the peace in that area. And they're also the ones who are guarding and protecting the animals and uh, other elements found therein, such that if a person disturbs the spirits or the diwata or incanto, we also call them incanto in our vernacular, they would either inflict pain or sickness or illness to the person, and the person may behave differently. The person may behave in a bizarre manner. And we should always attribute that most of the time as the workings of these elementals, the diwata or the guardian spirits of nature. Sometimes you also attribute them to anitos. Anitos are usually the gods and goddesses dwelling in that place or dwelling in the, for example, in a field or and also in a mountain. But sometimes you also call anito as the spirits of our ancestors who are living and staying in that place still. And if we disturb them or we are disrespectful in that place, they would cause us to get sick or behave in a different, in a abnormal manner. We also have the elementals, right? So they could either be friendly or unfriendly elementals, such that if you or disturb that place or you were disrespectful of that place, for example, you went there and cut a big tree without performing the proper ritual, you would anger those anitos and their encantos. And later on, you will have manifestations in your physical body. Also in the Philippine culture, we have the so-called nuno sa punso in our vernacular. These are like the elves and dwarves dwelling in if you notice the mound of earth that's growing in our backyard or in the fields, we believe in the Filipino mentality that there are dwellers inside that and we should not disturb them. Otherwise, if we disturb them, it would cause different manifestations physically in our body. In our folklore and our mythology, we also have the so-called kapre. Kapre are tree dwellers who are also guardians of that place or that big tree. And so when you disturb them or you are disrespectful to the place, they would eventually cause you to become sick or be afflicted with something else. Okay. Another etiology of illness that we attribute here in the Philippines is the work, if it's not the work of an elemental or a being, it's and we believe that it's because it's the work of a mangkukulam or somebody who knows sorcery or witchcraft. Okay. Okay. And sometimes in the southern area of the Philippines, we also have the so-called mambabarang. And this is also a form of like a black magic, a person who knows black magic, but they would make use of animals and insects to harm the person's body. And eventually they would be sick or they would be distressful or they would become, um, uh, some of them may even die. All right. So our indigenous approach to these causes of possible illnesses in the Philippines is, of course, the way we diagnose, the way our healers, indigenous healers, diagnose these ailments or these illnesses. There are many ways and we collectively term it as tawas. Tawas actually is a method wherein the healer or therapist will try to discern the cause or identify the possible source of the ailment or distress or anxiety being experienced by an individual. So a tawas is like an alum, or they would try to dissolve it in water and then put that over a candle, and the healer or the shaman although our albularyo will be able to see if there's a figure that is formed like a diwata or a spirit, then they would say that, oh, you got this illness from the river because you disturbed the diwata or the spirit dwelling there. That's for tawas. Another methodology is through the diagnosis is through the use of candles. So the albularyo would make use of candle droppings, and then when a certain figure or form is made visible on the water, they would interpret that and they would see what elemental or what if it's the doing of an elemental or a spirit or somebody or a mangkukulam or somebody who knows witchcraft, they will tell the person, oh, you got this illness or this anxiety or distress coming from this source. Another popular way of diagnosis for in the traditional or indigenous healing practice in the Philippines is through the use of eggs. They would usually break the egg and into the water, and based depending on what is formed on the water or on the glass, they would see uh, the figure of an elemental or the figure of a capre or the figure of a punnuno or an elf or a dwarf. Depending on what the albularyo will see, they will give the diagnosis or the etiology of the ailment or illness being encountered by an individual using what they saw from the egg formation. Okay. So, the way Filipinos treat or the indigenous healing practices of in the Philippine setting is unlike what we do in the Western approach, wherein they just treat the individual as an individual, as a separate being. But in the Philippine culture, it's always communal. It's always the family members, the whole family is involved. They perform rituals, they perform dances. For example, they disturb a spirit in the dwelling in those trees. So those families would be performing certain rituals or dance or music in order to appease the spirits or elementals dwelling in that place. So it's not only something unlike the approach in Western lens, the person is just going to be performing or doing what needs to be done. But in the indigenous healing methodology in the Philippines, it's communal. It's done by the whole community. The other picture here on the slide is also another approach used in the uplands of the Philippines, wherein family members or community members, together with the other members of the family, they would offer different kinds of peace offering. So we have, they usually in our community, in our area, it's usually chicken. They would have to shed the blood of chicken, or it could either be a pig or any form of sacrifice in order to appease or as an offering to the elemental or the spirit that was being disturbed. So it's always a community work. It's going to involve the help of the albularyo, the shaman, and all most of the time members of the family. So they would make offerings like what they had for harvest, fruits, vegetables, rice, and it will always involve some form of offering of coming from like a chicken or a pig or sometimes even bigger animals. So that's in the Philippine context. Now let's shift the lens to our Indonesian counterparts and how they see or they look at the different approaches in the indigenous lens. So we also going to look at the theology of mental disorders, the healers and therapies in the Indonesian context, and how they diagnose, how they proceed with the diagnosis and intervention and treatment. So the first one that I've found that we have so much similarity as the cause of an illness is in our vernacular, it's the mangkukulam or the wits. But I've learned that there is a counterpart in the Indonesian context. We have the dukun santet. So this is a practitioner of a black magic. So they would cast spells and bring harm to the target. It's very similar to what a mangkukulam or kulam does in the Philippines. And they would also cause pain and even to the point of death to their target without going physically or approaching the person physically, and they would be able to inflict pain or suffering to that person, anxiety or distress. So it's interesting to note that even the first Indonesian president, Susilo Yudhoyono, he acknowledged publicly that he believes in witchcraft and what they can do to target and inflict pain to the person. He posted that in the Washington Post in 2014. So it just shows us that even our leaders, they acknowledge that there are people who can bring harm or distress or anxiety to a person with the use of black magic. And the Dukun Santet is the exact equivalent of our kulam in the Philippine context. So, but I think the methodology is there lies a difference because they can conjure egg-sized green ball and it would fly through the air, and the person or the target or the enemy will become sick or they will be having a debilitating illness and depending on the instructions written by the Dukun Santet. So interesting that even if we have different cultures and we didn't have different beliefs, there is a similarity in how we try to understand the illnesses or the causes of our illness. Even with the malicious spirits, so we in the Indonesian context we have the jinn, so they are the dwellers of also of like graveyards or also of different areas or nature or the forest, but they have malicious intent, and because of that, they will also bring illness and anxiety and distress to a person. So I think the jinn is the counterpart of our nuno or the counterpart of our capre or the counterpart of our encanto. It's just a different terminology, it's just a different nomenclature, but the concept is exactly the same. So how do traditional or in how does Indonesia approach healing? So we also have traditional healers in Indonesia, and that is the dukun. So if we have the albularyo in the Philippines, we have the dukon in Indonesia. It's really interesting and fascinating to know that in our approach to understanding mental crisis or behavior, there lies a similar pattern. So we are indeed brothers and sisters in this aspect. So the dukon or the albularyo in the Philippine context is a practitioner who tries to diagnose and treat both physical and spiritual ailments of an individual. And the approach is to treat for mental health issues, uh, for example, for spiritual distress, possession, or curse. And they would also perform certain rituals, incantations, and herbal remedies. And it's called jamu. It's interesting that there are lots of words that we share, just like what Sir Anwar mentioned earlier about Pangasinan asin. I think this is very similar to our vernacular jamu, meaning damu, meaning herbs or leaves. So there's just a difference in the probably in pronunciation, but the root of the word is there. So jamu, but in the Philippines it's damu. Okay, and also create charms or amulets, or anting-anting. In the Philippines, we call it anting-anting or talisman to protect somebody from evil intents or malicious spirits. So very similar to what we have in the Philippines. I think we share a pattern. We share a similarity in the therapeutic approach and how we try to understand or treat or bring healing to a person. And similar to Atawas, the Dukun may also use divination or trance to determine the specific causes or the etiology of that illness. And it's sometimes, most of the time, rooted to a spiritual or a magical cause. Another group of healers or traditional or indigenous healers in Indonesia is the Balian, or they are the Balinese healers. And in Bali, this is the specific traditional healer, and they make use of also the leaves and herbs and plants around them. So still very similar to our albularyo in the Philippine context. And they consult an ancient palm leaf manuscript. So I think the leaves of the coconut or the leaves of the palm tree for diagnosis and herbal cures. So if in the Western approach, we have the DSM to consult and to help us diagnose a certain disorder or mental disorder. The traditional approach or the Balayan approach or indigenous methodology, we consult the ancient palm leaf manuscript. So I believe the diagnosis and probably the treatment is also written in the palm leaves. And the way to cure is also written in the palm leaves. It's very interesting. We don't have this, we don't have manuscripts written in leaves, but uh, uh, it's nice to know that there's a methodology being used by traditional healers in Bali using palm leaf. And the traditional or therapeutic approach used by Balinese healers is also very similar to how we approach hear them uh, in the Philippines, because uh, the goal is to restore balance in the individual by working both the physical or what is seen is what is tangible, the sikala, and also the niskala, the unseen or the spiritual worlds. I think this is where our difference with the Western approach lies, because the Western approach would only treat the individual physically, physiologically, what's tangible, what's seen, but they fail to understand or fail to take into consideration there's also the unseen or spiritual realm wherein treatment or healing needs to be performed as well. So these healers try to incorporate meditation and massage. So we also have the hilot in our Philippine setting, and also complex rituals to help connect the patient with their spiritual harmony. Because for them, again, it's a discord from their surrounding and harmony from their environment. Another indigenous healing approach, it's unique to Indonesia. We have the spiritual specialist. So we have the Kiai or studs. These are the wise men or the learned or the experts of the of their the faith. So they are the most consulted healers, especially when it comes to mental distress, which is predominant in the Muslim areas. So the approach is to healing into healing is reading through the Quran. This is the holy book of the Muslims, and they use the knowledge in the Quran to exorcise or drive away the spirits or the jinns who are possessing an individual. And they also do spiritual counseling. Also in the Philippines, we have spiritual counseling from our pastors and priests, but sometimes it's not the immediate go-to of Filipinos. They would first go to the albularyo instead. But this is something unique for Indonesia. So apart from the Kiai, they have the smart person or the Orang Pintar. Orang Pintar probably he's the wisest or he's the most um, learned in the community, so it's also a traditional shaman healer or traditional healer using their knowledge to diagnose and treat the magical religious ailments being experienced by individual. So, ingat guru ngaji kita, meaning let's follow our teachers. It's interesting to note that guru in Indonesia is also guru in the Philippines, referring to a teacher. So this approach is that the students will follow the teachings, the guidance, and the advocations of the guru in order to bring harmony and healing to whatever distress and uh, illness they are having. So we have the faith-based healing, the Kiai in Indonesia. The Kiai or Ustads is the religious scholar or a teacher in the community, and they try to treat mental illness as a spiritual problem. But this, they try to understand it stems from the loss of iman, the loss of a faith of a person. The person's faith is becoming weak, and so they're influenced by jinns or spirits. And therefore, the approach to therapy by the Kiai is to involve intensive prayer and counseling based on the Quran. And they also provide cohesive and culturally validated explanation for their suffering coming from the Holy Book. And they also perform exorcisms or ruqya to remove the unfriendly or the malevolent gene that's causing the psychiatric symptoms being experienced by the individual. For in the Indonesian traditional or the indigenous approach in Indonesia, this intervention is highly credible and it does not stigmatize the person in the community. And then we also have the pesantren in the Indonesian context. We don't have this in the Philippines, but the pesantren are the schools where these people go to and they function as a therapeutic setting or a place of refuge for people afflicted with mental stress or illnesses. Indonesia is lucky to have this because in the Philippines we don't have this apart from the psychiatric clinics or hospitals that we have. But it's good that we have this kind of faith-based healing techniques or intervention in Indonesia. So in the Pisantren, patients can live there and they engage with spiritual discipline guided by the spiritual leader. Their life is structured and they have a community life inside. And this offers a lifelong and long-term collective rehabilitation without the intense shame experience of malu or the stigma that comes with a person who is admitted in a psychiatric hospital here in the Philippines. So in the Indonesian mind body spirit framework, the component is spiritual because today, of course, we're just talking about the spiritual aspect. There are other areas, but in the interest of time, we're just talking about the spiritual side of it. And then in the cultural concept, it's because the person has weak or has lost faith in their teachings, and therefore the genes or the spirits play on them, and they cause the illnesses or distress in the person. And so the impact to mental health is that the person with a weak faith can be possessed easily by a gene, and they can be solved or healing could be brought by a kiai or the leader through counseling and also prayer. So how do we go about this? So with this knowledge now that we share, the knowledge that we have in the etiology or the possible causes of the illnesses or mental distress in our Southeast Asian setting, what we can do is to decolonize the diagnosis. What do we mean by this? We can move away from the foreign diagnostic categories that we usually have in the DSM-5 that pathologize our normal cultural behaviors, because in the DSM-5, this would be viewed as something unorthodox or unnatural, and therefore they would label it as inaccurate or not credible. But because, again, the DSM is based or written by Westerners or American authors, they failed to incorporate the cultural aspect that is rich in the Southeast Asian countries. We are not going to dispel the ones we learned from DSM, but we are going to supplement what we know in the diagnosis understanding of disorders or mental health distress or illnesses in an individual. So we share a common indigenous perspective in terms of anxiety, and it's always rooted to a spiritual crisis. So it's not because of physiological causes, it's not because of chemical imbalance, but for us it's a fundamental disruption in the soul and the attack of unseen forces in the environment of the individual. And therefore anxiety is seen as an external affliction. It's because of the attack of malevolent entities or black magic. So again, in the Philippines, it's coming from Anitos or the dwarves or sorcerer, which we share from Indonesia because they have their dukun santet and the jinn or the spirits. So what is now, therefore, our therapeutic implication in trying to understand our cultural roots, looking at the indigenous lens or indigenous approaches in healing the person? So with our culture and the way we understand the mental disorders being experienced by an individual, we externalize the fault, we externalize the disorder, we externalize the illness of the person, and the individual therefore is framed as a victim of a spiritual attack or from someone than a person suffering with a mental defect or mental disorder than a person with a physiological disorder or imbalance in the chemistry of his brain. So therefore, this allows the indigenous healers, we have the albularyo, the Y.A.I, and the dukon, to apply what is culturally accepted and validated in our community as spiritual remedies. So we have exorcism prayer, amulets, leaves, herbs to treat anxiety and remove the offending entity. And therefore, the healing focus is um, our indigenous treatment for anxiety or distress or mental illness focus on rebalancing not only the physical body, but also the spiritual core of the individual. So we do that by simultaneously using herbs, rituals, and prayers, and try to restore the strength of the loob or batin of the individual. What is our key takeaway for mental health? Therefore, we using our lens in the indigenous approach, traditional healing methodologies. Mental health is holistic and collective. Spiritual concern, it's not just an individual biomedical issue. So the locus of healing is the soul, not just the brain. We are not just looking at the person as an individual moving because of the physiology of his body. And therefore, if we are trying to heal not only the brain or the physical aspect, and we look at the soul as also as interconnected, it's the most effective intervention that because one speaks to the soul and not just the symptom. Another takeaway from this is that therapy must be relational and communal. It's not just the burden of one individual. It's not just the illness being experienced by an individual, but actually it mobilizes the whole family and the community. So it's communal. It's we have the gotong royong for Indonesia, and these are the primary agents of support in the of the person experiencing that distress or anxiety mental disorder. And therefore, the future is the integration. Again, we don't have any intention to replace what is prescribed by the DSM-5 or what is how we understand illnesses or mental disorders using the DSM-5. And we're not going to abandon modern medicine, but we can integrate our indigenous wisdom passed on to us by our ancestors and our elders to create a hybrid, a combination of a culturally intelligent model approach to healing and treatment. So I would like to end my presentation, short presentation, with this quote: true mental healing is spiritual. We must treat the wounded soul and not just the anxious mind. Okay, so this ends my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. Um, terima kasih to our brothers and sisters from Indonesia.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Rogelio, for that insightful presentation. Up next, we continue our journey learning from Indonesia. She will be sharing on the theme Cultural Roots Mental Health in Indonesia, introducing Ms. Dewi Sukriyah, a psychology lecturer and assistant vice rector at Universitas Persada Indonesia Y.A.I, with more than 15 years of experience in teaching, counseling, and academic leadership. She is also taught internationally in Germany. She holds a master's degree in psychology from Russia and currently pursuing her doctorate in educational psychology. Let's all warmly welcome Ms. Dewi Sukriyah. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dita. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. And also, I would like to say thank you to all the participants of today's event. Since Mr. Rogelio has already shared his presentation, and I really noticed that we are quite similar to each other, only different pronunciation or different name. Yeah. So, but right now I would like to present my presentation with the title Cultural Roots Interweaving Indigenous Southeast Asian Approach in Mental Health in Indonesia, an overview of traditional values and practices in Indonesian mental health. So I would like, okay, maybe the title first page. So even though Indonesia and the Philippines share many similarities, but I believe there are also distinct differences in various aspects. That is why today I would like to provide some insights into mental health from the Indonesian perspective, which is already explained by Dr. Rogelio, but I would like to add some more information. And I hope this presentation will help to broaden our horizon by the end. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so as already Dr. Rogelio mentioned before, that mental health is not only about what happened inside a person's mind, but also about the environment, culture, and tradition that shape how people think, feel, and behave. And in every society, culture influences how people understand about their stress, about their anxiety, and other emotional struggles. And in Indonesia, culture and tradition play a very quite strong role in shaping how people see mental health. Emotional well-being is not viewed as something purely individual, but rather as something that is deeply connected to family, community, spirituality, religion, and belief systems. I think it's quite same with Philippines also. In Indonesia, mental health is more than just how the brain works, but also it is deeply connected to spiritual beliefs, traditions, family ties, and community values. So understanding these cultural aspects is pretty important for providing the right kind of support and care. And in many ways, understanding the culture and combining it with professional treatment will better equip professionals to support their clients. Next slide, please. Okay, so when we talk about mental health, it's pretty important to remember that culture shapes how people understand illness, healing, and well-being. So different societies may look at mental health from very different aspects. For example, I would give the example in Western country, for example, like United States or in Europe, the focus is on the individual. So mental health in such country, the problems are often described in terms of individual pathology, meaning that something is wrong within the persons, such as chemical imbalance, trauma, or personal stress. And the treatment is usually individual based, such as personal therapy sessions, psychiatric medication, or cognitive behavioral therapy. The goal is often to help the person function better as an independent individual. And it's pretty different than in Southeast Asia, especially including Indonesia in this case, that mental health is not seen as only an individual matter. It is strongly connected to family, community, spirituality, and tradition. And people often think about well-being in terms of harmony within oneself, with other people, with nature, and even with the spiritual world. Mental health problems may be understood not only as medical conditions, but also as signs of spiritual imbalance, disturbance from ancestors, or disharmony with social norms. Healing often involves the family and the community, such as family discussion, religious leaders, traditional healers, and rituals are part of the process for the treatment. So in simple words, I would say that in Western psychology, probably they often ask what is happening inside this person, but in Southeast Asian culture, often ask how is this person's relationship with family, community, nature, religion, and spirituality. So the question is quite different between Western and Southeast Asian culture. But both perspectives are valuable. Understanding these cultural differences will help us give better support for people's mental health, especially in diverse countries like Indonesia and also Philippines. Next slide, please. Mas Yudi. Can you see my slide already? Okay. So the cultural perception of mental health in Indonesia, that in Indonesia, culture strongly shapes how people understand mental health. Many communities still believe that mental health is caused by supernatural factors, already mentioned by Dr. Rogelio, such as spirit possession or black magic. And because of this, families often seek help first from dukun, or in Tagalog, albulario. So it's quite similar, dukun and albulario, or religious leaders rather than from mental health professional. And while these traditional approaches can provide comfort, but they sometimes delay proper medical diagnosis and treatment, which makes the recovery more difficult at the end. And I would say that some people in some region in Indonesia, they are quite afraid or do not fully trust professional help, and instead prefer to turn to traditional healers rather than to the professional help. And this often takes more time for recovery and can delay the healing process. Next slide, please. Okay. In many parts of Indonesia, mental health is not only seen as a health issues, but also tied to moral and spiritual judgment. People with mental health conditions are sometimes labeled as kurang iman in Indonesia language, or in English like lacking faith, or maybe people will call them also lemah which in English is weak, or even influenced by supernatural forces. And because of this stigma, families may feel shame and prefer to hide their relatives rather than bring them to a clinic or to a hospital. And social expectation to maintain family honor, or we call it menjaga nama baik keluarga, make it even harder to openly discuss mental health. And because of this pressure often results in isolation, late treatment, and in some cases, harmful practices like pasung. In English is physical restraint, which although officially it's already banned, but it still can be found in rural areas. Such practices reflect the deep tension between traditional beliefs, limited access to care, and social stigma surrounding mental health in Indonesia. Next slide, please. Okay, so religion is deeply woven into Indonesian culture and daily life. And for many people, faith acts as a protective factor, giving them social support, resilience, and a sense of hope when facing psychological distress. So religious communities often provide comfort, guidance, and a sense of belonging. But also at the same time, religion can also become a barrier to seeking professional help. Mental health symptoms are sometimes seen only as a sign of weak faith, sin, or even spiritual possession. So as a result, as I already mentioned before, that individuals may delay or avoid medical treatment. And in practice, many Indonesians adopt a plural approach to healing. So combining medical treatment, for example, like visiting doctors or psychologists, and also combined with prayer, rituals, and alternative healing practices, it will be reflects a cultural effort to balance modern healthcare with spiritual beliefs. Next slide. Okay. So in Indonesia, there is a clear contrast between urban and rural contexts when it comes to mental health awareness and services. In big cities such as Jakarta, where I'm living right now, or in Surabaya, Bandung, Yogyakarta, public awareness of mental health is steadily increasing and growing. People know about mental health and they're quite aware about mental health. So educational campaigns, media coverage, and the presence of universities with psychology faculties also contribute to greater understanding. And access to psychologists, psychiatrists, and mental health facilities is more available in big city, making it easier for people to seek professional help. But since Indonesia geographical position is quite similar to Philippines, with both consisting of many, many islands, it is not always possible for every area to have proper access to campaign, education, related resources, or even internet connection. So that is why in rural or remote areas, cultural and traditional beliefs often play a stronger role in interpreting mental illness. Symptoms may be attributed to spiritual causes, witchcraft, or moral failings, and leading families to turn first to religious leaders or traditional healers rather than medical professionals. So that's why at the same time, the shortage of mental health professional and infrastructure outside major city make access to proper care extremely limited. And this urban-rural gap highlights the importance of culturally sensitive intervention and policies that address both education and accessibility, ensuring that mental health support reaches people across Indonesia regardless of location. It will be hard work for our government since our geographical position is quite lots of islands. It will be lots of hard work for all of us in Indonesia. Next slide. Okay. So the younger generation in Indonesia, particularly Gen Z and millennials people, they are showing greater openness in discussing mental health compared to older generation. So influenced by global conversation on social media platforms, they are more likely to talk about issues such as anxiety, depression, stress, and etc. And they are quite increasingly willing to seek professional help or peer support. Online communities such as like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, and other platforms, and also mental health campaigns and influencers who share their personal struggles have helped to reduce stigma and create safe spaces for dialogue about mental health. But also in the same time, that social media that encourage openness also bring new psychological risk, like constant exposure to curated lifestyle and achievements of others, which is we call it like FOMO, or fear of missing out, and comparison stress, leading many young people to feel inadequate or left behind. So that's why the rise of cyberbullying and then online harassment and then toxic digital culture significantly affects self-esteem and mental well-being. So the pressure to maintain a positive online identity can create hidden distress that is not always visible offline. So I would say that social media is like double-edged sword, yeah. It can be positive, but also at the same time, it can be negative. It's democratized mental health awareness, but also continuously introduce unique stressors that require resilience, digital literacy, and targeted mental health intervention for the younger population. Next slide, please. So we come to indigenous healing practices in Indonesia. I think Dr. Rogelio already explained quite detail. I will add more. So the first one is dukun. Yeah, as I already mentioned, it's quite similar like albulario in Philippines. Dukun is traditional healers who use jamu. Jamu is kind of herbal medicines, mantras, and also rituals. They are often the first point of contact for families dealing with illness, including mental distress. So normally people go to dukun when they are living in rural area or remote area. But normally in big city, we not really have trust anymore with dukun. So this is more likely to the rural area. And the second one is selamatan and tahlilan. Yeah, it's a kind of definition like community rituals that bring people together for prayer, and then they can also food sharing and emotional support. So these events help reduce grief and also in the same time strengthen social bonds between each other and provide collective healing. And the third one is musyawarah. Yeah. So musyawarah is kind of a traditional practice of dialogue and consensus to resolve conflicts. So it helps reduce interpersonal tension and promotes harmony, which it will be supports mental well-being. So in practice, many Indonesians combine these indigenous approaches with modern mental health care. For example, a person may visit a dukun or attend selamatan, but also in the same time seeking counseling or psychiatric treatment. This blending reflects Indonesians' efforts to balance between cultural traditions with professional psychology and psychiatry. Next slide, please. Okay, so in Indonesia, effective mental health care often means integrating modern approaches with local traditions. And this can be done by collaborating between religious leaders, traditional healers, and also trusted figures in the community. So therapists can also use local metaphors and cultural symbols to make therapy more relatable and meaningful. At the same time, providing culturally sensitive mental health education will help to reduce stigma while respecting community values. And when modern and indigenous practices are combined, the benefits include greater trust, reduced barriers to seeking help, and more holistic healing for individuals and also for families. Next slide, please. Okay, so while integrating modern and indigenous approaches offers many benefits, there are also important challenges. So traditional healing practices still need scientific validation to ensure safety and effectiveness. And collaboration between professionals and traditional healers can raise also ethical concerns, especially regarding patient rights and treatment standards, because they are quite different between traditional and modern treatments. So at the same time, modernization is slowly eroding traditional values, making it harder to preserve cultural wisdom. And finally, stigma and cultural silence around mental illness remains strong, preventing many people from openly seeking help. So it's quite difficult to combine between traditional and modern treatment in Indonesia. Next slide, please. I cannot see my slide in here. I just can see my face. That's why I don't know. It's show you the slide or not. It show the slide, Dita?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank
The
you.
conclusion. Yeah.
So yeah, this slide I would like to tell that indigenous values play a vital role in enriching mental health care in Indonesia. Concepts such as gotong royong, which is already mentioned by Dr. Rogelio, which means like gathering together, and also spirituality show that well-being is not only about the individual, but also about harmony with family, the most important, and also community and the spiritual world. And these values provide unique strengths and that can complement modern psychology and psychiatry. And by integrating indigenous wisdom with modern approaches, I think Indonesia can develop mental health systems that are not only scientifically sound, but also culturally relevant and sustainable. I believe it can be like that. And collaboration with religious leaders, traditional healers, and local communities will make the treatment more trusted and accessible, also understandable for some people, and while reducing stigma and ensuring that care respect local beliefs. And this blended approach can serve as a model for holistic mental health system, showing the world that cultural traditions are not obstacles, but rather powerful resources for healing. So with the right balance, Indonesia, I believe that Indonesia and also Philippines has the potential to lead in creating mental health practices that honor both modern science and cultural heritage. So I think that's all for my presentation, and I would like to close my presentation with in Tagalog. Sana ang aking presentasyon ay magahatid ang bagong impormasyon para sa inyong lahat. Salamat po. I hope I pronounce it correctly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dewi Sukriya, for the depth discussion. It's amazing to see how cultural wisdom is deeply tied to our approaches in caring for mental health. Let's all give another big round of applause to our amazing keynote speakers for the depth discussion and also for the explanation about terms of practices in both countries. Okay, now it's your turn. We open the floor for your questions and reflections. This is a wonderful opportunity to engage directly with our speakers, so please do not be shy to ask some questions. Please raise your hand or type your questions in the chat box. Any questions for the speakers?
I think everybody already understood
Not yet.
what the presentation.
Any questions? Please don't be shy to ask questions. No questions? Or any reflections or anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would like to add that I really noticed that Philippine and Indonesia is quite similar, but only different pronunciation. And for example, albulario, it's quite similar with dukun, and then also jin with, I don't know, I forget the name of in Philippines. But yeah, in Indonesia, especially in remote area, we are still struggling to help people to be aware about their mental health because they are much more concerned about physical health rather than mental health. But in big city that like Jakarta, Bandung, Surabaya, Yogyakarta, or even in Bali, people much more aware about mental health. And I think it's the same in Philippines, right? I think people in Manila, they are much more concerned about mental health and also physical health. But in remote area, maybe it's the same situation. I believe like that.
Thank you, Miss Dewi Sukriya. So any more questions or reflections? Wow, I think you guys already explained very thoroughly, so I think they don't have any questions for the moment. So thank you for our speakers for your amazing explanations. Before we move to the closing part of the event, we will now proceed with the distribution of certificates and reading of the certificate contents. So the certificate. Okay, so the first certificate we would like to be presenting for Miss Dewi Sukriya in recognition of serving as a distinguished speaker in the general lecture organized by Lorma Colleges and Universitas Persada Indonesia Y.A.I, with the theme Cultural Roots Interweaving Indigenous Southeast Asian Approach in Mental Health, held today, October 1st, 2025. Please, this is the certificate. And also next, we have the certificate of appreciation for Dr. Rogelio Quiroga in recognition of serving as the distinguished speaker in the general lecture organized by Lorma Colleges and Universitas Persada Indonesia Y.A.I with the same theme, held today, October 1st, 2025. Once again, thank you, Dr. Rogelio, for sharing your knowledge and the time with us today. Your presence has truly enriched our event. And also, thank you for Ms. Dewi Sukriya. We are deeply grateful for your time, expertise, and all the information you shared with us. Before we close the event, we will now hear some closing remarks from our representatives. From Universitas Persada Indonesia Y.A.I, please welcome Mr. Zarkasi, Master of Psychology, as the Head of Psychology Program. Is he available? Okay, I think he's still not here yet, so I think we can just move to more Lorma Colleges. We are pleased to hear from Ms. Lorraine May Romero, the Faculty of College of Psychology.
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so wow, what a nice lecture from our two speakers. And to give my closing remarks, so to my esteemed colleague from Lorma Colleges and from Universitas Persada, Indonesia, the lecture is actually more than just a lecture. It was an act of the cultural homecoming. Okay. Today, we have powerfully affirmed that our deepest roots are where the most profound healing can be found. This collaboration from the two schools, university shows that when we put aside our differences and lean into our shared heritage, we do not just expand our perspective, but we strengthen our soul. So I encourage everyone who are here, do not let do not let just this be in our screen, but rather carry this the renewed commitment, these lectures that we have to culturally rooted healing into our communities. Let this be a guide in your practice and later to your future practice, and let this be our voice. Thank you to our dear partner for this important work, and let's move forward. And knowing that the most effective and the most equitable path to well-being is that we are one. Okay, we build together. And yeah, thank you, salamat, and terima kasih. Our work has just begun.
Thank you, Ms. Romero, for the heartfelt closing remarks. To officially close our event, may I request everyone to kindly turn on your camera for our photo session together. Okay. We're waiting for a Okay. Smile, everyone. Let's take the picture together. 1, 2, 3. One more. Smile. Okay. Perfect. And now that concludes our program for today. On behalf of Universitas Persada Indonesia Y.A.I and also the collaboration with Lorma Colleges, I, Dita, your MC, would like to thank you all for our distinguished speakers, participants, and all the organizers who made this collaboration possible. Today, we've not only shared knowledge, but we also strengthened our bonds as neighbors and friends in Southeast Asia. May the insights we have shared today continue to inspire us in integrating our cultural roots into mental health practices. Thank you very much. Till we meet again, and have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you. Salamat po.
Salamat
Thank you very
po.
much, ma'am. Thank you,
Thank you very
Ma'am
much.
Supriya, and to Ma'am Dita.
Thank you, Dr. Emilia.
Thank you to all your students also. See you again in our next collaboration.
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Rogelio.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you. Thank you very
All the
much.
students.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih.